Thank you to all my channel members, including my fan appreciation level members and my contributor level members, for helping support the YouTube channel. Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have my book review of the book Ashes of Victory, the 9th book in the Honor Harrington series. I have been reading this series for the last couple of years. Big fan of it. Just to go through the books real quick to give you my brief thoughts, we had On Basilisk Station, which was, I thought, a terrific start to the series. And then we had The Honor of the Queen and the Short Victorious War, which I thought were pretty good. And then we had my two favorites in the series thus far, which were Field of Dishonor and Flag in Exile, which I thought were superb books, all-time science fiction books. And so we had those two books that were great. And then we had a run of books that I thought were good, but too long. And that was, you had Honor Among Enemies, we had In Enemy Hands, and we had Echoes of Honor. And they told a really interesting story. It just was taking too long to tell that story. And that's exactly how I feel about Ashes of Victory. This is the 9th book. It's about 650 pages, and in my opinion, it's about 250 pages too long. I'm going to start with that critique first. I believe that David Weber. I was just reviewing a David Mack book recently. When David Weber is writing science fiction, when he is kind of in that 350 to 450 page range, he is fantastic. That is where he shines, in my opinion. And books like On Basilisk Station and Field of Dishonor and Flag in Exile are just terrific examples of that. And when he starts getting a little bit bloated in the page count and the word count, he starts adding too much. His focus kind of spreads out too much, and the story is not as contained, and it's not as paced well, and so it feels like you're reading this kind of wandering epic a little bit in some ways. And I really believe that if he just cut it down, focused, and said, all right, some of these stories don't need to be present, or they can be in other types of books, spin-off books or something, and this focused on Honor Harrington, I think that Ashes of Victory would have been a superb book, because when it is on certain plot lines, this book is incredibly entertaining. When it is focused on Honor Harrington, when it's focused on her parents, and when it's talking about Hamish Alexander, the Admiral Whitehaven, and when it's including the political stuff with Manticore and Grayson. When it's doing any of that stuff, this book is all-timer storytelling. Like, I was absolutely hooked for that stuff. And I will say, I did enjoy some of the Napoleonic era, Horatio Hornblower era types connections in this book. So when it was doing that stuff, I thought the book was, as the kids would say, peak. I thought it was superb. Like, literally, those plot lines had me hooked so well. But the book also has some plot lines that I didn't like at all. I would say it focuses on a few minor characters from Manticore that really I felt were unnecessary. And then there's also a bunch of plot lines over in Haven. Now, I understand why the People's Republic of Haven is brought in. He wants to provide the perspective of the other Star Kingdom that they're at war with. And, as I mentioned a second ago, the kind of Napoleonic era coup d'etat that happens in the book, I thought was actually really clever. But there's so many characters to follow. There's so much that he's trying to do with that storyline that if he just dedicated a book to focus on the Haven characters and instead let this focus on Honor Harrington and our main protagonists, I think it would have flowed a lot better. Ironically, there's not much action happening in the Honor Harrington stuff, and there's a ton of action happening in the People's Republic stuff. But the People's Republic stuff is really complex, and it's really chaotic because of the battles and stuff, whereas the stuff here is with Honor is much more political, and it's much more calculated, and it's so honed in that you know everything that's happening. And so I really liked the Honor Harrington. So to kind of give you a bit of a knowledge of where the series is at. So this is going to be light spoilers for the series. I'm not going to go crazy in depth, but Honor Harrington, all the way back in enemy hands, was captured by Haven, and they I don't know. They pretended that they killed her. They filmed a public execution that was fake. And then in Echoes of Honor is all about her going to what's known as Hell, but it's really this planet that's a prison planet where they dump prisoners, and she is meant to live there the rest of her life, and it's supposed to be hopeless. Think like Rura Penthe in the Star Trek Undiscovered Country movie. And so that's where she's supposed to be. But because she's Honor Harrington and she's a bad, awesome woman, she's able to bring in this huge group of people together to escape. And so in Ashes of Victory is all about her return to Manticore. She has risen from the dead, metaphorically. She's not actually risen from the dead, but everyone thought she was dead. Everyone, because she is not only an admiral in the Manticoran Navy, she is also not an admiral. She was like a commodore in the Manticoran Navy. She's also an admiral in the Grayson Navy. She's also a stead holder for Grayson, and she was, I believe, a baroness or a countess. I don't remember which, but she had a position in the Manticoran hierarchy as well. So she had all this stuff that when she died, which was about 2 years ago in the storyline, she left behind a vacuum, and she had such huge shoes to fill. And now she's back, and what do they do with those shoes? What do they do with Honor now that she's back from the dead? And that was a brilliant part of the story, seeing how Manticore was kind of one-upping Grayson because they didn't want her to be too high a position in Grayson, and Grayson one-upping Manticore and all that type of stuff was brilliant. Seeing what they did with her parents was great. I was so invested in seeing how everything tied together there, seeing the reunions at the beginning of the book, seeing how Honor now has to, she's injured in this book. You can assume what one of those injuries that she has is, but she's very much injured in this book, and it's about her kind of nursing back to health, her nursing Nimitz, her cat, back to health, and seeing that was just great. I loved it. Then you have the political stuff on Manticore. Queen Elizabeth III on Manticore is dealing with a political crisis in this book, and I loved the way that they incorporated Honor Harrington into the political crisis. I thought that was great, a great way to do it. It didn't seem implausible. It didn't feel like you were shoehorning a character that was supposed to be there. It felt like it fit perfectly, and I loved that political crisis so much. And at the end, I was like, no, don't do it! Don't do it! It was so well done. And then you also have the stuff back on Grayson, where Grayson is a very backwards type of planet, and the people of Grayson are still trying, like Honor's like an exception. They don't treat women that well on Grayson, but they do with Honor just because she's that foreign woman. And it's really funny the way they treat her in this book now that she's come back from the dead. And so it's all of the Honor Harrington stuff, specifically in this book, was delightful. And there was, of course, as I mentioned, so many Horatio Hornblower connections in this book. I would say there are 3 books in the series thus far that have felt like they just were Honor Harrington storylines. Horatio Hornblower storylines ripped from the books, ripped from the Horatio Hornblower TV show. And On Basilisk Station had so much that felt like the midshipman stuff happening. Same with Field of Dishonor. I thought that also really connected with the Horatio Hornblower elements. And then I would say the last book, Echoes of Honor, did that as well. Especially the being on the prison planet. There's a plot line where Horatio Hornblower is captured by the Spanish, and I thought that was so similar. And here, her return is very much like Horatio Hornblower, and I thought that was handled so well. And I love those connections. I know there are people who are frustrated because they feel like David Weber established the Horatio Hornblower aesthetic in space, and they felt he tethered military science fiction to that. However, I would say, looking at the state of military science fiction in the last 5 years, I think that it is no longer tethered to that, and I would say that what David Weber did is still incredible. The way he was able to make homage without just ripping off. I thought that was great. And then, as I mentioned, there's a Napoleonic era feeling to the book where you have Manticore is obviously England. I mean, down to the fact that they have, like English monarchy type stuff. The military is like the English military in the Napoleonic era. And then the People's Republic of Haven is just this chaotic republic that they keep overthrowing each other and they keep distrusting each other and doing all this crazy stuff, coup d'etat, stuff like that. And so it felt very much like they were dealing with a Napoleonic figure in this. And so I loved all of that elements of the book. So don't get me wrong when I say that there were parts of this book that I genuinely loved. Top tier, fantastic. I loved that stuff. But then I can also say, boy, was this book at times a slog. I would say about 400 pages of this book was genius, and about 250 pages of it was just a slog. And that's frustrating to say, but that's how I feel about it. And unfortunately, from here, he goes huge. This book was 650 pages. The next book in the series is just under 1,000. And that's War of Honor. And then you have At All Costs, which I think is like 800 pages. And then you finally start to decrease a little bit to like the 600 or 700 range. It's just at 6 or 7. It's a 600 or 700 range. But it's still going to be super long from here. And that's what really deters me, is that I can read super long books. I've read, Ken Follett's 1,000-page epics, which have really small font, some of them. I've read Wheel of Time epics and stuff, and I'll say Wheel of Time has some of the same problems that David Weber has here. But I can read long books, but when it just feels, as I said, like a slog at places, where there's stuff I love, but there's also so much I don't love, it makes it so difficult to rate it highly. So I'm going to give the book a 7 out of 10, knowing that the parts that were brilliant were darn brilliant, and the parts that were boring were dull and boring. So that's how I feel about Ashes of Victory. And let me know in the comments if you've read the Honor Harrington series, what you think of it, what you think of David Weber's other series that he's written, and what other types of military science fiction books I should be reading. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.